Hello all, this is the Owl, and today, man I'm excited. We're finally going to be taking a look at Terraformars, a bug-nuts insane sci-fi horror action thing, and there's just a ton to talk about here. From controversial designs, to a truly creative power system, and buckets of... yes, love?
You aren't covering Terraformars, dear.
Wait, really? Then what the hell was I supposed to be covering today?
You're doing Biomega.
Not that one! Okay then. So today, we're finally going to be taking a look at Biomega, a bug-nuts insane sci-fi horror action thing, and there's just a ton to talk about here. Tsutomu Nihei is another really fascinating chap to talk about. He was an architecture student before he became a mangaka, and was heavily inspired by Clive Barker, Geiger, and Ridley Scott, which no, it's not obvious at all. And he has, among other things, collaborated with Marvel, doing a 5-issue run on Wolverine, and as a Halo mega fan, was employed to work on those comics too. And if you've read his Western stuff and found it interesting, just wait until you read his manga. Nihei was, in fact, previously an assistant to Tsutomu Takahashi, likely best known for his pitch-black detective manga Jiraishin, which is a favorite of Mrs. Owl's, by the way, even though I've always considered it decent, but a bit disjointed and overlong, and I've often wondered if there was some connection between Nihei and Hiroya Oku, as there are quite a lot of similarities between their works, but I cannot find anything, so shrug. Regardless, Nihei sounds like a genuinely awesome dude. Even though his manga tend to be... you'll see. He's actually probably better known for the excellent, if even more stark and impenetrable Blame, and the well-reviewed, but I'll confess I've never read, Knights of Sidonia. But as Albard patron Polite Crow requested this one, thank you so much for that, mate. C. In Japanese terms, Nihei is one of those auteur types that prefers ambiguous stories, that reject conventional narrative structure, employ minimal, even utilitarian dialogue, and have a flow and pacing that are completely unique. Which in layman's terms means trying to understand this story is going to make your brain squeak, as it's structured like the author was either making it up as he went along, on hard drugs, or probably both at the same time. Yeah, Biomega has a case of the howling crazies, and I'll be perfectly honest with you, I've read this thing maybe 5 times, and every single time, I still get vaguely lost in the maze of similar looking characters, constantly shifting perspectives, acronyms, dense jargon and terminology, time jumps back and forward, and locations referred to only by a sequence of numbers and letters, with vital plot details buried in all of this, often relegated to the end of volume intermission segments or brief descriptions. Oh, and there are explosions. So many explosions. Yeah, this manga makes Dorohedoro look positively normal. This manga is what Alejandro Jodorowsky, Katsuhiro Tomo, and David Lynch's love child would write after watching Ghost in the Shell on a loop for a year. This manga is harder to follow than a Trigun action panel, and yet I still sort of love it. As mentioned before, I do have a soft spot for excellent but scuffed stories, and Nihei is probably the paragon of this, due to his seeming inability to end stories properly, not always due to his own error, we'll get there, and his almost deliberately obfuscationist style, which is quite something. Before we start though, a few ground rules. First up, I was very tempted to tell this thing out of order, by which I mean tell it in actual chronological order. But no, we'll be going volume by volume, as I think the absolute bafflement this manga can inspire at times is frankly an essential part of the experience. Secondly, I'm not going to be explaining over much until the end. Another YouTuber by the name of Insane Studios did a decent plot explanation, and you're welcome to go and drop by to see it there. Thirdly, a lot of this manga is fight sequences interspersed with minimal dialogue or other visuals, meaning that these won't be quite as long as some other video series, but we will still be compiling it into one long video at the end, which should make this long intro seem a bit more suitable. Finally, with how frigging complex this thing is, I am almost bound to make some mistakes here and there. Feel free to correct me in the comments, as I know Nihei has a dedicated cult following that is pretty damn passionate, and you guys are going to be able to piece this together far more effectively than my old brain can. Anyways, we've got a lot of ground to cover, so let's dive on in. Welcome to Biomega. We start out... Okay, so calling this post-apocalyptic isn't exactly right. It's more pre-post, and I guess incipient apocalyptic fiction, as well as being cyberpunk of the highest order. More like something out of David Gemmel's Jerusalem Man series than Blade Runner, or honestly Judge Dredd meets Cable's future from the 90s. Initially, we see a panorama of several suited figures exploring a bleak Martian wasteland, and we're informed that it's the year 3005. This is the first manned trip to Mars in almost 1,000 years. The figures have come to salvage an ancient human colony, and in a sequence very reminiscent of the first two Alien movies, they begin exploring. As they do, they find a bunch of weird, eerie stuff, including several insect specimens pinned to a board. Yes, as with nearly everything in this manga, some of this will be important later, a lot of it won't be, and no, you won't know which is which for a very long time. They continue exploring deeper and deeper into the colony. However, they freeze, seeing something utterly impossible. They are not alone. A creepy-looking figure, unsuited, confronts them in a hallway, and yes, you can already see one of the things that makes this manga so damn good, and also so damn hard to follow. First up, the art is just amazing. I am a huge fan of this more traditional style of seinen art. Very sketchy and high contrast. Lots of cross-hatching and deep shadows, as opposed to the cleaner style that had become the norm for a while even then, thanks in part to the success of Berserk. Nihei's art actually reminds me a bit of Blade of the Immortal somehow, which was also something of a throwback visually. And if you've read Blade, you will know that this is quite a compliment, as whatever his faults may be, Hiroaki Samura has artistic chops the size of aircraft carriers. The second is that Nihei doesn't go in much for dialogue, and when he does, it often serves to make the reader even more confused, not less. You'll see what I mean in just a bit. Anyway, we then cut forward 6 months as as you'll see, it's basically an Akira bike, tears along an impossible ocean-spanning bridgeway, finally arriving at an immense, almost fortress-like city. Yes, artity art gushity gush. We get a good look at the rider, and as I said, Akira bike, and this is all just so damn cool. We'll talk more about this as the story progresses, but it's very much a Nihei thing, which some view as style of a substance, and I view as a very specific sort of storytelling. more aimed at creating memorable vignettes, moments, and tableaus, as well as cultivating a distinctive tone and mood, more so than crafting a coherent narrative. Is that okay? Is that pretentious? That's up to you. The biker is our main character, Kanoe Zoichi. For now at least, yes, that statement was intentionally ambiguous. As with so many things, you'll see why later. And we learn that he's been sent here by a group known as Toa Heavy Industries for reasons, and that this city, or at least part thereof, has been quarantined and sealed off due to some sort of epidemic. Our first look at the inside of the city gives us some more of that distinctive Nihei art, and you can really see how much he loves to play with lines and perspectives. Lots of curves and weird, almost uncanny geometry that pulls your eyes all over the place. Always keep in mind that the chap was an architecture student, and this really does become evident in the story. We also get to meet Fuyu Kanoe, who we'll gradually learn is an AI partner that's integrated into his bike, and according to Mrs. Owl, who partially read this thing over my shoulder, is probably inspired by that blue lady from Halo, and that a fair bit of this manga is actually very much Halo, allegedly, but as I've never played the games, I'll let you point those bits out in the comments. Yes, Fuyu and Zoichi do share a last name, and there's a reason for that, which, like nearly everything else, will be kind of explained later. Soon, we see why this area has been sealed off. Drones. And these things are dope. Huge cyborg zombies that are one part Geiger, one part Resident Evil, and one part Judge Dredd baddie, and like so many other aspects of this manga are just so incredibly cool that it's impossible not to love them. Biomechanical body horror gorgeousness. Distracted by the drones, can't blame you mate, Zoichi accidentally collides with a civilian, badly injuring her and snapping off one of her legs at the joint, in the first of what is going to be a great many panels that I probably can't show you on the YouTubes. Yeah, the gore in this manga is absolutely gnarly. All sorts of insane body horror. He wipes out the drones with his crazy powerful pistol this has to be inspired by the lawgivers from Judge Dredd, right? Regardless, it just turns them into meat paint, and he moves to help the woman he injured, only her leg immediately regenerates. But before he can do anything, a strange voice rings out, and yeah, just like that, we're into the wild shit. And spoiler, it's only going to get crazier from here. We see that the owner of said voice is that a bear with a gun? Yes? Yes, it certainly is. And wouldn't it be weird if this bugger turned out to be pretty damn integral to the plot? The huge, rifle-wielding and talking bear calls the woman by her name, Eon, and is revealed to be her protector. Zoichi, in turn, is something referred to as a synthetic human, and tells said bear that he's here to help purify the city and kill the drones, but he's actually telling pork pies. Once the bear leaves, it turns out that he's here to get said girl. Full name, Eon Green. Eon, as it so happens, is what's known as an accommodator. She's infected by the virus that turns people into drones, N5S, meaning that she is... I don't think the term Typhoid Mary applies here, but she has the virus, and rather than mutating, it gives her superpowers including high-speed Wolverine-like regeneration, among a few other things. Think Wesker from Resident Evil, I guess, but not a gigantic smug dickhole. We get a fun little nod to a distinctive Castlevania design here, which, believe it or not, is likely itself a nod to a classic Mickey Mouse cartoon, The Mad Doctor, that was widely banned for being way too frigging scary for kids. Seriously, Google it. It's worth a watch even just for the mind-blowing animation even now. We also start getting some visual clues to some of what's going on, in the form of a photograph showing us a bespectacled man holding a bear cub. Said bear gets a knock at its door, his door, I don't know, and sees this creepy dude outside said door, an inspector for the Public Health Service, who, spoiler, are not the good guys, implied here to be checking for potential infection. As far as I understand it, these bastards are part of the compulsory execution unit, and that name says it all. A special sort of nasty, as we'll soon learn, ostensibly there to purge N5S infections, but in reality their role is a bit weirder. Regardless, the bear prepares to escape with Eon, but before he can grab her, it turns out that she's gone. Uh-oh. We also get a better look at said inspector who, I could swear I've seen this design somewhere. It's pretty dope though, I really like the bloody apron. This turns into a firefight between him and the bear, which sadly the inspector handily wins with a jetpack and a rocket launcher concealed in his arm. Yeah, as you'll realize, the fights in this thing are bloody amazing. But we're not doing a blow-by-blow. I strongly recommend reading this for yourself regardless. Trust me, the fights alone are worth it. Meanwhile, Zoichi is headed fast to their position, but is stopped by, oh right, these dudes. They also work for the Public Health Service and are basically just goons. For the longest time, I thought they were inspired by the Combine from Half-Life 2. Remember, Nihei seems to be something of a fan of Western shooters, and this had just come out at the time. But after looking into it a bit, I actually think they were inspired by, or at least are a nod to, a very obscure villain group from the X-Men comics, as Nihei clearly also loves his Marvel. Yeah, it may surprise you, but a good number of mangaka also enjoy Western comics, often Marvel, but more commonly Todd McFarlane's stuff from his era of Image. It's a long story, but they do have a tendency to put nods and sometimes direct rip-offs of designs into their work. And yes, I will talk about this more at some point, maybe if I ever do Goblin Slayer. Anyways, Zoichi goes through them like turpentine through a sheep, with his awesome pistol his primary weapon, but by the time he arrives, the fight has concluded. There's a joke about a right to bear arms here, but I can't think of a good one. The inspector is, however, still hanging around looking for Eon, and seriously, I have seen this design somewhere. If you have any idea what might be being referenced here, please let me know in the comments, because this is bothering me. Regardless, they clash, with the inspector seeming to come out ahead handily by means of his cybernetics. Man, the art in this thing is so good. The high contrast lighting, the sparks, damn it. The fight concludes when the inspector lands a good one on him, resulting in Zoichi getting blasted out of the tower and falling through a glass roof a long way below. The inspector in turn finds and nabs Eon, who's wearing, yep, that's a bear suit, and no, I still don't know why she's wearing it. Before, if I stop to talk about every bit of crazy awesome art in this manga, it would be about 6 hours long, so I will stop. But damn it, that is cool. He blows the entire castle sky high with what looks like some sort of mass driver, and then leaves with the girl. Zoichi comes to. Yeah, this dude is nigh unkillable, but realizes that Eon has been taken by the inspector and heads off, I cannot believe I wrote this, hot on his trail. On his way though, he decides to save the bear, sealing its wounds and preventing it from bleeding out. And as they flee the collapsing castle, we learn a bit more about the accommodators. They are essentially drones, but they can control their bodies and retain their self-awareness, which is why Toa wants them presumably to help cure the virus, I think, and why the PHS, yes, the manga, is just a wall of weird terms, acronyms, and wibbly-woo, which is one of the reasons why it can be so damn hard to follow, to be honest. And we also get another one, the Data Recovery Foundation, who were responsible for the mission to Mars we saw at the start of the volume. So, right now, let's confirm. We have Toa, sort of the good guys, albeit of ambiguous morality. The DRF, who we don't know much about yet, but are connected to the PHS, who are quite villainous. Think Wayland Yutani, to stay on the Ridley Scott theme, and the CEU, their elite Black Ops units. If I am not mistaken, I probably am. However, it turns out that, yeah, something went very, very wrong with said mission, and it's resulted in this. An eerie visual that may not seem like much, but we soon learn that this is a dronified crewman who is now drifting in low orbit around the Earth, shedding N5S spores and presumably infecting the entire planet. That's not good. We get another bit of information drip-fed to us in that the N5S virus is extraterrestrial in origin, which will also be explained a tiny bit more later. Yes, I know I keep saying that. It's just the way this manga is put together. The bear's name turns out to be Kozlov Grebnev, because of course it's the most Russian name imaginable, and as they part ways, we get Zoichi's next destination in his search for Eon, a heavily drone-infested area known as MSCF-7. Just roll with the place names. Overall geography is not important here. Sure enough, yep, that's a zombie horde alright, and Zoichi, in one of maybe 100 sequences in the manga that just blows me away, tears through them with his... Okay, so, this is allegedly an axe, although I've always wondered if it was partially inspired at least by my favourite weapon of all time, a hook sword. You know, those things Cabal uses in Mortal Kombat. These are, by the way, very much like my second favorite weapon of all time, the Kusarigama, essentially a mostly fictional or show weapon, almost never employed on the battlefields, more designed to look cool than be practical. Regardless, he just bulldozes through here, while also evading missiles and shells from the Contra boss? I don't know. Whatever the hell we're trying to get to. Sorry, this manga makes my brain hurt sometimes trying to figure out exactly what's going on. And eventually he reaches his destination, proceeding down a deep shaft and entering the facility where Eon is being prepared to be taken elsewhere. Zoichi proceeds to just mow down the guards, and okay, here we get our first indications of Zoichi's true power, as he deactivates mana mode, which I assume means that he will now annoy the entire cinema when he gets a phone call. But no, it actually means his gun is now stupidly overpowered, and he blows the extremely nasty inspector's head off. Well, mostly, yeah, I can't show you this. But couldn't you have done this earlier, mate? Only there's something else here. An ominous female figure, wrapped in threads of some sort, that raises its hands and blasts him with some sort of psionic energy. Yes, that's gonna be a boss fight later on for sure, right? And also... yeah, it wouldn't be a weird post-apocalyptic cyberpunk story from Japan without frigging Espers. We'll discuss these in more detail when we get there in Gantz, as it's pretty interesting why these show up in so many damn manga and anime, especially those from the 80s and 90s. Long story short, Western movies that got a wide release in Japanese cinemas, kind of a rarity in the 70s and 80s, often inspired an absolute metric ton of derivative popular culture and touchstones in Japan. Which is why Jason Voorhees is honestly even more iconic over there than he ever was in the West. No, I am not kidding, there are actual Jason-themed restaurants, and that is kind of awesome. Anyways. A bit banged up and mildly stunned, Zoichi gets to his feet as the submarine VTOL thing leaves. But because this manga cannot take a breath even for a second, a hand grasps the edge of the platform and something huge rises from the water. It's the inspector, and he looks a little different. Yep, it's time for our first mini-boss. And yes, the pacing and some of the other aspects of this manga weirdly remind me a lot of the Dead Space games, especially 2 and 3. Or is it just me? We actually get a bloody amazing extended transformation sequence that ends with the inspector looking like a giant melting Keith Richards doll and initially completely overwhelms Zoichi, blasting him clear through several crates. However, when he counterattacks, he actually wins fairly easily, punching a hole through the thing and then decapitating it with his axe. However, the head starts to do this, gross, and revealed that the PHS is actually doing that thing. You know, that thing where we're going to kill or mutate all the humans because it seems like a good idea for some reason master plan. Sure enough, it turns out that there's multiple ICBM silos here, and they are preparing to launch. They're aimed at major population centers and the Toa bunkers. Yeah, just go with it. Causing Zoichi to realize that this is now the priority and he gives up on Eon for now. And this leads into, yeah, no joke, one of the coolest damn things you'll ever see. Zoichi deploys an almost comically huge gun as we switch to an utterly gorgeous charcoal-y art style. Also very much a throwback to older seinen manga, with the missiles launching and heading into the atmosphere. Yeah, we'll get back to this in a second. Elsewhere, we see that, yeah, the PHS are every ounce as bonkers as hinted, as a news announcer tells everyone what's going on and that they are all doomed to techno-organic zombiehood. He then unalives himself in an incredibly nasty scene that, nope, can't put that on YouTube. Zoichi targets the missiles and fires that ridiculous gun. It's so friggin' cool! And he shoots them down in the upper atmosphere in the climax of Volume 1 and succeeds in preventing the nuclear annihilation facing most of the planet, but then departs, knowing that the virus is going to do everyone in anyway. Regardless, he contacts Kozlov and tells him that he and Fuyu will be going after Eon. As the volume draws to a close, we get a brief overview of what's going on outside, and it's bad. Basically World War III, with all of the aforementioned organizations fighting like cats in a sack. And yes, the entire battle is basically shown in a handful of throwaway panels. Our final sequence of Volume 1 is another bit that's very confusing, but in a nutshell, from what I can understand, this is Go Hinoto, not Zoichi, another synthetic Toa agent, who is retrieving a sample of an N5S variant for reasons, and while he is able to send it to his superiors, I'm guessing, or maybe the DRF, it's not horribly important honestly, he is then confronted by this Cenobite-looking bastard, Higuide, who essentially turns him inside out off-panel. And that's it. Volume 1 done. And yeah, if you're going, well, I can follow along okay, just you wait. Oh boy, just you wait. Anyways, before we finish, I just want to say a huge thanks, as always, to my amazing patrons, without whom there is no way Mrs. Owl and I could keep on doing this. Cheddar, Crazy, Question Man 6, Hunting for R2D2, Inukia Koji, Cal Core, Opinion Custard, Philip Campbell, Piece of Yeast, Ranger Danger, Rose Montgomery, Wargle, The Empress, Camoleon, Cheshire Quill, Endymion, Aaron Arnold, Fluffy Burb, Jake Ramsey, Lance Goebel, Rafferty, Simone, and Squid. I also want to say an extra special thanks to our 2 Owlbard patrons, Jathis and Polite Crow. That is so generous. I am genuinely floored. If you also want to help support this channel and get your name in the credits, plus all sorts of cool patron extras like early videos, unique videos, Discord perks, a thing coming in Halloween that should put a smile on your dials, why not head on over to our Patreon? Otherwise, if you do want something a bit different, why not go and request an art commission from the amazingly talented Mrs. Owl? She did the avatars that I use on this channel, and a ton of other assets, and I can promise you, you will not find this quality at this price elsewhere. All details, as always, are in the description. Otherwise, take care, my friends, and I will see you next time. This is the Owl, signing off.